This is Bill Newman, WHMP.
Welcome to NPR, Northampton Poetry Radio, with erstwhile Poet Laureate of Northampton, Rich Michelson.
Hey, Bill, how are you? And welcome to everyone. We have a guest today that I'm very much looking forward to this. Matt Donovan. Many people will be reading. Let's just start right at the beginning. So you can put this on your calendar because I know you're all busy today doing a lot of stuff. So mark it down. November 1st, tomorrow, 7 p.m., Weinstein Auditorium at Smith College. Matt will be reading from his brand new collection, The Dug Up Gun Museum, and he will be reading with Nathan McLean, who, just by happenstance, will you believe this, will be our guest tomorrow on Northampton Poetry Radio. How does that happen, huh?
I don't know. The world works in mysterious ways.
It's great. So Matt is the author of 2 previous poetry collections, a book of lyric essays. He has won a Whiting Award, a Rome Prize in Literature, an NEA Fellowship. All that is to say that he's an important poet, well respected. And for us local folks, he is the director of the Boutel Day Poetry Center at Smith College. He is the guy that brings in all the good readers for us and brings the poetry to the Valley. But we are here today to talk about Matt as a poet. And his new book, again, The Dug Up Gun Museum by Boa Editions, one of the premier presses in this country. It is absolutely a beautiful book, and it is a moving and quite devastating book as well. Those people who know my poetry know that my father was a victim of gun violence, and I have been writing about that for 40 plus years. This book, The Dug Up Gun Museum, is about this country's obsession with guns, its history of gun violence, its fetishization of guns. It's about violence, race, power, privilege, and it is just moving. So, Matt, I'd like to start out just so people get a sense of your work, and then we'll talk a little bit about it. Can you read to us a poem?
Here the thing with feathers isn't hope, but a 400-pound pistol in the bed of a pickup, welded together from scrapyard metal and stamped with names of kids shot and killed near the artist's home. Except for all the feathers, dyed cotton candy blue and affixed to the pistol's cylinder and grip, wrapping the length of the barrel with a flourish like a boa entwining a neck. It might seem like any other oversized gun. Conversation piece, he called it, although the feathers came later, only after he'd begun driving south with a plan to haul the sculpture from Chicago to Atlanta, then back through Charleston and Sandy Hook. But when he stopped for gas the first time, he knew his art had failed when a man sprinted across the parking lot to say, "God damn, that's one badass gun." Something needed to change. Maybe feathers could turn the pistol into a thing you approached with a question instead of praise. And if the plumes now covered some of the names, bearing the elegies hammered into metal, what choice did he have but to continue driving through town after town, listening to the wind's song whipping across the wide mouth of the barrel, tending to the gun now and then from a sack of feathers he kept in the back seat to use whenever storms lashed things loose.
That is Matt Donovan reading from the Dug Up Gun Museum. He will be reading tomorrow night, November 1st at 7 p.m. at the Weinstein Auditorium in Smith College. So, Matt, when I first picked up this book, I expected to maybe have a poem or two about gun violence. I didn't realize that it really was a sustained look at this country's violence from the beginning of the country until today, and there's no shortage of subjects. I'm wondering what, because you have written essays and a book of essays, I'm wondering why you decided to attack this subject in poetry as opposed to essays.
Yeah, that's a great question. So, to be honest, the book started out as a nonfiction project. I wanted to, like so many of us, I was incredibly concerned about gun violence in our country, but also completely infuriated by our lack of an ability to enact real and meaningful change. Motivated by that, I wanted to go out, I wanted to travel the country, I wanted to meet people, I wanted to learn more about guns and gun culture, I wanted to talk to people about guns, and I didn't want to write it as a book of poems. I wanted to write it as a book of even straightforward, mass market nonfiction, in order, in my mind, to reach as wide of an audience as possible, to ask the questions most directly. I had an agent for that project. Things were moving forward with that project. And then we went out with that as, we approached different presses with that as a nonfiction book, and nobody was interested. And the response that I got back from the agents and the editors was, this is one of the most important issues of our time. Gun books don't sell. No one wants to read a book about guns. So either you don't like guns and you don't want to read a whole book about it, or you are someone who is a gun owner and you don't need some gun noob telling you anything about guns. And so that project fell apart. And for a long time, I wasn't sure it would become anything else. But there were so many people I encountered and images that I saw and moments that I couldn't relinquish from my travels. So I just started to write them as initially shorter prose pieces, and then gradually they became some of the poems in this book. So that's why it ended up morphing into a book of poems.
I'd be interested to know, Matt Donovan, whether in your research, in your talking to people, whether you came across gun owners who were actually totally rational about this topic, whether they felt put upon and somehow categorized and classified in ways that they felt were unfair and wrong, and whether that in any way changed your attitude or your perspective with regard to gun ownership.
Absolutely. It's such an important question and point. I not long after I started the project, I found myself, for instance, in Cody, Wyoming, and I sat down with someone who was a gun store owner. And he sold guns in a shop, and he was someone who was a proponent of arming teachers in the public schools, something at the time that was a pretty new idea. Unfortunately, I think that has become more common. But one of the first things he said to me was, he said, when you say you're writing a book about gun culture, he said, what exactly do you mean by that? And he started to list, he said, so you could be thinking about gun collectors, you could be thinking about hunters, you could be thinking about someone who, is a prepper versus a survivalist versus someone who has it for ordinary protection. And what he pointed out to me was I was thinking about it in monolithic and kind of stereotypical terms. So I didn't agree with a lot of what that gun shop owner had to say about guns, but what he was pointing out to me was my reductive thinking about it. So, and then to answer your question, there almost, I'd say I met one person in Cody who was not a gun owner.
You found the one person in Cody, Wyoming who doesn't own a gun. That's good research. That's not easy to do.
And it was not someone I was looking for. He just happened to mention that he was actually at a cafe and he happened to mention that he did not own guns. But there, for instance, on that school board, there were people who were fighting hard against this plan to arm public school officials, but they were gun owners. They were people who had grown up, say, like with going hunting with their families. And the one reason why they were against arming public school teachers was because they understood the danger of guns. They understood the complications of training someone for that purpose, and they were leftists, they were progressive on every political issues, but they also happened to be gun owners. This poem didn't make it, this chapter didn't make it into this collection of poems, but I traveled to Michigan and I went hunting with my brother-in-law. He's an avid hunter. He owns several guns, and he is an incredibly responsible gun owner, as is, the other friends of his that I met there. They are also someone deeply concerned about gun violence in this country. And they also, not only are they responsible gun owners, but they are incredible stewards of the land. They could identify trees and species that I could not. They put my own knowledge of the world to shame, and that was worth thinking about too. That, to simply vilify hunters is also, I think, a mistake. So to answer your question, absolutely 100%.
You are listening to Matt Donovan. He will be reading tomorrow evening, 7 p.m. at Weinstein Auditorium at Smith College. We're going to take a break. We will be back with Matt and talk more about the poetry of this book in a moment.
This
is Bill Newman, WHMP. This is Bill Newman, WHMP.
A young cowboy named Billy Joe grew restless on the farm.
We continue our segment, Northampton Poetry Radio, with erstwhile poet laureate Rich Michelson and our very special guest poet, Matt Donovan. Rich.
Hi. Well, we could obviously talk about this subject for hours and hours. It's a complicated subject.
And the subject, for those of you just joining us, is guns.
Is guns. Matt will be reading from the Dug Up Gun Museum, his new book of poetry, tomorrow night, 7 p.m., November 1st at Weinstein Auditorium. Be there. This is an important book. Matt's an important poet. He will be reading with Nathan McLean, who will be on our show tomorrow. So you're in for a treat. The subject matter is difficult, but it must be approached, and it's done in a beautiful, beautiful way because, again, there's music to these poems. There's complexity to these poems. Let's give people another look at what another listen to what they're going to hear tomorrow.
Sure. This is a poem that actually references that story I was just talking about meeting someone in Cody, Wyoming. This is called Solipsism, a Story. Victim mentality, he told me, means sitting with your back to the door anywhere at all, even, I was learning, while sipping a Red Bull and surrounded by tourists at the Hotel Buffalo Bill named after his daughter. I'd more likely leave my house without my pants than without my gun. So even though we were talking in the Irma's side saloon about plans to arm Cody's teachers, scenario training, lockable holsters, the deterrence of not knowing who's armed, the theme was readiness is all. Pistol in hand when opening the front door, peering through his gun shop's window before stepping inside. And how whenever he drives to another town, he'll have an AR-15 and extra mags and a quick zip-off on the back seat, a .45 on the hip and ankle guns strapped tight, while his girlfriend rides shotgun with a .38 in her purse and a .40 caliber in the back without fail. 5 guns for a drive to Billings. Just in case, you never know. What else could I think but you have to be kidding me, and I can't wait to tell this tale. Before leaving town, I circled back to his store, wanting to hard grip his hand, see what else he might let slip. As I strolled the rifles and pistols, clips and cases, gun safes and gunpowder, waiting for him to finish whatever he was doing with the gun he held. The green eyes of a taxidermy leopard stared at something that was not me. Its dark mouth hinged open to show the curved shape someone had chosen for its tongue. Hey, I'm glad you came back. Don't take this the wrong way, but I've been telling folks I met some guy who doesn't own a gun, an unarmed dad, and no one can believe it. We looked at each other for a half beat, maybe more, and didn't say what we were thinking about how each of us had chosen to move through this world, or how both of us by then had turned into a story about something impossible, glimpsed somewhere we thought we knew. I haven't spoken to him since.
That is Matt Donovan reading from the Dug Up Gun Museum by Boa Editions. Matt will be reading November 1st, tomorrow evening at 7 p.m. at the Weinstein Auditorium. And Matt, just quickly, because we don't have a lot of time left, I know you've also written a chamber opera piece on Sarah Winchester. This is a subject that has consumed you for a long time. Why?
Why have guns
Yeah.
consumed me? Oh gosh. Well, I mean, just our prevalence of gun violence, our failure to enact change, my concern for my own kids, my feeling that it would be possible to enact some kind of change if we were able to have authentic dialogue about this topic that's so divisive and that so often I think fails to even get going, and also because America never seems to run out of another story where someone has been needlessly killed about guns.
Yeah, it's
from guns.
It's fascinating. It's a beautiful book. It's an amazing book. Were you able to write other poems while you were doing this, or did this really just take over your life?
This took over my life. This project consumed me. I mean, in part because there so much of it was about traveling. I wanted to get out and travel the country and talk to people, so that was one thing that was time consuming. And there seemed to be so much that I wanted to try to cover here. So I did not write any other pieces that didn't involve guns at the time. I will say it is a little cathartic to be moving on to new pieces in which no one gets shot.
Right.
I'm trying to write some new poems now.
And you're also working on an art exhibit that will be opening next month at APE. So look for Matt and his wife at APE Gallery. Lots going on, Matt. It's been a pleasure. I hope everybody can make it tomorrow night. Congratulations on this book. Thank you for contributing to this dialogue in such an important way. And it's poetry. It's beautiful and musical. So
one more time,
everyone.
Rich. When and where?
One more time. It is tomorrow night, November 1st, Weinstein Auditorium at Smith College at 7 p.m. with Nathan McLean. Hope to see everyone there.
Thank you both, Matt Donovan, Rich Michelson.